I thought throwing the perfect birthday party for my daughter would cover up the family's cracks, but I didn't expect it to become a live broadcast of my wife's betrayal. I stood in our kitchen delicately placing the final candle on Madison's birthday cake. The number 6 sparkled in pink, matching the gleam in my little girl's eyes when she first saw the decorations. Despite the long hours at my company, pride swelled inside of me. I had managed to plan every aspect of this party myself. "Alex, hurry up with that cake." Rebecca's impatient voice echoed throughout the living room. I sighed, brushing away any hint of annoyance. Today was about Madison, not my wife's social media antics. I picked up the cake and made my way to the crowded living room. "Here comes the birthday girl's favorite superhero," I announced, grinning as Madison's face brightened. "Daddy." She squealed and rushed towards me. I quickly sat down the cake and scooped her into my arms. "Happy birthday, princess," I whispered. I caught Rebecca's attention as I planted a kiss on Madison's forehead. Before setting Madison down, she gave a tight smile, before returning to her phone and outwardly updating her Instagram story. I pushed away a glimmer of disappointment and concentrated on our guests. "Done. I'm glad you could make it, buddy," I said, clasping hands with my best friend. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Alex Dillon responded, his eyes crinkling with genuine affection. I saw Carter, Rebecca's co-worker, hovering nearby. "Carter, thank you for coming," I said, holding out my hand. "Of course," Carter responded. His handshake was slightly too firm. "Rebecca has told me so much about little Madison." Something about his tone made me pause, but Madison's excited chatter drew me away before I could reflect on it. The party progressed, filled with laughter and the antics of sugar-fueled children. I found myself constantly drawn to Madison, basking in her joy. This was what mattered. As the cake cutting approached, I reminded myself to ignore the nagging feeling that something was wrong with Rebecca. I retreated to the kitchen for a moment of silence. The sound of hushed voices made me pause in the doorway. "Nat, we can't keep doing this." Sean's voice is low and urgent. "Relax, Rebecca. Alex is clueless. He's too busy being super dad to notice anything." My blood became cold. I entered the kitchen just in time to see Rebecca pull away from a deep kiss with Carter. The world appeared to tilt on its axis. Rebecca's gaze met mine, and instead of guilt, I saw cruel amusement. Well, she replied, her lips curving into a mocking smile. "Rebecca, it looks like the party is over." I started off with a surprisingly steady voice. "What the hell is going on?" She laughed, the sound grating on my ears. "Oh, Alex is a sweet, naive guy. Did you really believe I was satisfied with your pathetic attempts to be a good husband?" Carter at least had the decency to appear uncomfortable, but he made no attempt to leave Rebecca's side. "You can't prove anything." "You," Rebecca said, her beautiful face twisted with contempt. A cold calm settled over me. I replied, reaching for my phone. "I can." Rebecca's face showed a hint of confusion. "Remember the break-ins in the neighborhood last week?" I inquired, maintaining a conversational tone. "Yesterday I installed security cameras in each room." Rebecca's face lost its color. Carter took a step back, as if to remove himself from the blast radius. "You're not telling the truth," Rebecca hissed, but uncertainty had crept into her tone without a word. I turned and walked back into the living room, Rebecca and Carter following behind me. Our guests arrived and the chatter died down. Since the tension, everyone I spoke, my voice carrying across the room. "I am afraid I have an announcement to make." I connected my phone to the TV. With a few taps, retrieved the security footage. The room fell silent as the video depicted Rebecca and Carter's betrayal in high definition. Gasps and murmurs permeated the air. Madison tugged on my sleeve, her eyes wide with confusion. I knelt beside her, protecting her from the worst of it. "Rebecca, Carter," I spoke in my own voice. "The heart is steel. Get out of my house now." Rebecca's face was contorted with rage. "You're going to regret this," she snarled, grabbed her purse and stormed away. Carter followed her, head down, avoiding everyone's gaze. As the door slammed shut behind them, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. But as I looked at Madison's worried expression, I knew I couldn't break down. Not now. It's okay, sweetheart. I pulled her close and whispered, everything will be all right. But deep down, I knew it was only the beginning. Even with a few close friends and family members who had stayed behind, the house felt emptier than it had ever been. Madison had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the day. I sat on the couch looking at the untouched slice of birthday cake on the coffee table. Alex Dillon's voice interrupted my thoughts. He sat next to me, concern on his face. How are you holding up, man? I laughed without humor. So what do you think? Dillon nodded with understanding in his eyes. Listen, I understand. You're probably not thinking about it right now, but you can't let Rebecca get away with this. I raised an eyebrow as I turned to face him. What do you mean? What do I mean? Dillon leaned in. His voice was low. She betrayed and humiliated you in front of everyone. She does not get off. Scott, a free part of me wanted to dismiss the idea of taking the high road, but there's another part, a darker side that I usually kept hidden. I resonated with Dillon's words. What are your suggestions? I asked. Curiosity is getting the better of me. Dillon's eyes gleamed. I might know some people who can make her life a little more difficult. I pondered his words, the pain and anger swirling within me. I do not know. Dillon, it's not exactly my style. Simply think about it. He pressed. You're a good guy, Alex. However, good guys do not always come out on top. As Dillon walked away, his words echoed in my mind. I found myself reaching for my phone and scrolling through contacts until I came across a name I hadn't thought about in years, Sophia Price, a private investigator. The voice on the other end responded, Sophia. It's Alex Hartwell, I said, surprised by the consistency in my voice. I need your help. The next few days were a blur of meetings and phone calls. I met with a top divorce lawyer, a shark in a suit, who assured me that we could leave Rebecca with nothing. So what about Madison? I inquired, the thought of my daughter caught in the crossfire, making my stomach turn. With what we have on Rebecca, the lawyer spoke with a predatory smile on his face. We will absolutely get you full custody. I nodded. A weight lifted from my shoulders. Do it. My phone buzzed as I was leaving the lawyer's office, indicating a message from Sophia. I discovered something big. Meet me at the usual spot. The usual spot was a small out-of-the-way cafe that we used to frequent in college. Sophia was already present. When I arrived, a thick folder sat on the table in front of her. Alex, she greeted me. Her eyes were shut. You look like hell. Thanks, I replied dry, sliding into the seat across from her. What did you find? Sophia's expression became serious. Your wife and her boyfriend. They're involved in some serious fraud at their company. She pushed the folder towards me. I flipped it open. My eyes widened as I scanned the documents within fake vendor accounts. Profit skimming. Sophia explained they've been at this for months. I sat back, my mind reeling. Here it is. This is perfect. Sophia raised her eyebrow. Perfect. Alex, this is a serious criminal offense. Are you certain you want to get involved? I met her gaze with steel in my voice. They chose to involve me at the exact moment they decided to betray me. Now they'll have to deal with the consequences. As I exited the cafe, a plan began to emerge in my mind. Rebecca believed she could walk over me and I was too weak to fight. She had no idea what was coming. I made a few calls to set things in motion, a new company to protect my assets, private money transfers and documentation of all interactions with Rebecca. That night, as I tucked Madison into bed, she looked up at me, worried. Will Mommy come home? Daddy. My heart clenched, but my voice remained gentle. Mommy will not be returning home, sweetheart, but I promise to always be here for you. As I closed the door to her bedroom, I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. Rebecca had made her decision. Now it was time for me to make mine. The following few weeks were a blur of activity by day. I was Madison's devoted father, keeping her life as normal as possible by night. I was a man on a mission, meticulously setting the stage for Rebecca's demise. Sophia's investigation had revealed a goldmine of information. Rebecca and Carter's fraudulent scheme was far more extensive than we initially suspected. They had been siphoning funds through a complex web of fake vendor accounts, all while profiting from legitimate transactions. This is significant, Alex Sophia said during one of our clandestine meetings. We are discussing potential prison time here. I nodded, a sense of satisfaction settling in my chest. That they deserve every second of it. With this information in hand, I started moving my chess pieces. My first step was to secure my assets. I formed a new company, a maze of paperwork that would make it nearly impossible for Rebecca to access my funds. That was a smart move, my lawyer commented when I showed him the setup. She will not see a penny of this. Then came the social aspect. I began subtly spreading rumors about Rebecca's infidelity among our social circles. It felt almost easy. People were quick to believe the worst about someone who had fallen from grace. Have you heard about Rebecca? I overheard in a local coffee shop. Apparently she has been sleeping with her co-worker for several months. Poor Alex. The whispers intensified, spreading like wildfire. Rebecca's once perfect social standing began to crumble. Friends stopped answering her calls. Invitations to events were mysteriously lost in the mail. But I wasn't finished yet. Using the information Sophia had discovered, I anonymously informed Rebecca's employer about her fraudulent activity. It wasn't long before I learned it through the grapevine that she'd been suspended pending an investigation. Mr. Hartwell, her boss, called me one time. I wanted to personally apologize for the incident with Rebecca. Rest assured we are taking this extremely seriously. I played the shocked, betrayed husband perfectly. I had no idea I spoke with just the right amount of hurt in my voice. Thank you for informing me. Rebecca's world started to unravel. I made sure to record every interaction we had. Every text, call, and interaction during Madison's drop-offs and pickups is meticulously documented and time-stamped, creating an airtight case for full custody. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of my strategy was psychological warfare. I started sending Rebecca anonymous messages that hinted at the extent of my knowledge about her misdeeds. Your secrets are not as safe as you believe. One message was read: tick-tock. Rebecca. I watched from a distance as paranoia began to set in. Rebecca became nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder. Her attempts to rebuild her life were unsuccessful. At every turn, job applications mysteriously fell through. Social gatherings turned into minefields of whispers and sidelong glances. Despite everything, I kept my cool. In front of the outside world, I played Alex Hartwell, the wronged husband who focused on being there for his daughter. Only a few people knew the full extent of what was going on. Dylan came by one night while I was sitting in my study reviewing Sophia's latest updates. Are you really going all out? He spoke with a mixture of admiration and concern. In his voice, I looked up at him with a hard expression. She attempted to destroy me. Dylan. She betrayed not only me, but also Madison. I'm making certain she never has the opportunity to hurt us again. Dylan nodded slowly. Just take care. All right. Make sure this does not consume you. I appreciated his concern, but he did not understand. This was not about becoming consumed by vengeance. This was about justice, about protecting what was mine. As Dylan left, returned to my work, the trap was set. The net was closing in. Rebecca would soon realize the true cost of her betrayal, and I'd be there to see her fall. The satisfaction of seeing Rebecca's world crumble was intoxicating. Every day brought new developments. Each one of was our pleasure. My phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. Rebecca. Alex. Please. We need to talk. Can we meet her? I stared at the screen. A cold smile forms on my lips. After a moment, I typed back. There is nothing to discuss. Rebecca. Her response arrived quickly. I apologize. I made an error. Please give me an opportunity to explain. I laughed heartily. An error, is that considered betraying your family? It was not like that. I was confused and lonely. Carter was there and I cut her off. Save it for someone who cares. We're finished. Rebecca. From now on, we will only communicate through our lawyers. I blocked her number without waiting for an answer. Later that week I got a call from an unexpected source, Rebecca's therapist. Drive Amelia Santos. Mr. Hartwell. This is Drive Santos. I am calling about your wife, Rebecca. I leaned back in my chair. Ex-wife. Drive Santos. Held out her. She has been attending sessions with me and I am concerned about her mental health. I was hoping you could share some insight into your relationship dynamics. I smirked, remembering the substantial donation I had made to Drive Santos's practice. Of course. Doctor, what do you want to know? Our conversation lasted about an hour. With each question I carefully woven a story of Rebecca's instability and deception. Knowing Drive Santos would use this information to subtly gaslight Rebecca during their sessions. I hung up. Dylan came into my office. How was the plan going? He inquired, a gleam of curiosity in his eyes. I grinned wider than expected. Rebecca is on a downward spiral and Shaw is following suit. Dylan whistled lowly. Remind me not to get on your bad side. Man, I shrugged. They made their decisions. They now have to face the consequences. Rebecca called me a few days later, panicking. Please, Alex, I need help. My accounts are frozen. My credit cards are maxed out and I'm facing eviction. I do not know what to do. I feigned surprise. That sounds serious. Rebecca, have you spoken with Carter about this? She choked back a sob. Carter is in worse shape. He's unemployed and under investigation. Please, please in the first or second ease. Alex, I don't have anywhere else to turn. That's unfortunate. I responded, my tone devoid of sympathy. But this is no longer my problem. Good luck, Rebecca. I hung up, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over me. The pieces were all falling into place perfectly. The custody hearing was the last nail in Rebecca's coffin. I'd gathered an impressive list of witnesses and evidence, all of which pointed to Rebecca's neglect and instability. The judge delivered his verdict. I saw Rebecca's face crumble. In light of the evidence presented, this court grants Alex Hartwell full custody of Madison Hartwell. Mrs. Hartwell's visitation rights will be restricted, subject to Mr. Hartwell's approval and supervision. Rebecca's anguish echoed throughout the courtroom. You are no longer capable of doing this. She's also my daughter. I turned to her with a low, cold voice. You should have considered that before deciding to destroy our family. As I left the courthouse, I knew the war was far from over, but I had won this battle and I was only getting started. I should have known Rebecca and Carter weren't going down without a fight. Their desperation rendered them dangerous, like a cornered animal lashing out. It began with whispers. Rumors started spreading about me. Accusations of abuse, manipulation, and even embezzlement. I knew immediately who was behind it. Dylan asked over lunch one day, "Do you hear what they are saying about you?" I nodded, sipping my coffee. Rebecca and Sean's handiwork. No doubt. Dylan leaned in, keeping his voice low. What are you planning to do about it? I smiled with a predatory glint in my eyes. Allow them to dig their own graves. That night I got an alert from my cybersecurity team. Someone was attempting to hack into both my business and personal accounts. Mr. Hartwell, my head of security, spoke on the phone. We've tracked the attempts. They originate from IP address associated with Carter Miller. I chuckled darkly. Excellent work. Make sure you have all of the evidence documented. We'll need it soon. The following day, I was served with legal papers. Carter filed a countersuit against me, alleging emotional distress and defamation. I called my lawyer right away. Robert, what is this about Alex? This is a desperate move. Robert responded, his voice calm. They're attempting to rattle. You do not worry. We are well prepared for this. I nodded despite his inability to see me. Did push back hard. I want them to regret ever attempting this. A week later, I was leaving my office and noticed Carter lurking near my car. As I approached, he emerged from the shadows. Hartwell growled, his eyed. You think you can simply ruin our lives and get away with it? I held my ground, meeting his gaze calmly. I did not ruin your lives. Carter, you and Rebecca did it entirely on your own. He lunged forward and grabbed my collar. You arrogant bastard. I will make you pay for this. I did not flinch. Instead, I smiled and nodded slightly to the left. Sean K's eyes widened when he saw the security camera pointed directly at us. Go ahead, Carter. I replied quietly. Give me more ammunition. I'm confident the judge will be very interested in this footage. Carter let go of me and I stumbled back. This isn't over. Hartwell, he spat. Before hurrying off, I straightened my jacket. My smile never wavered. Oh, I believe it is later that night. Sophia called me Alex. You're not going to believe what I discovered. She spoke with excitement in her voice. What is it? Sophia. Carter is into some seriously dark stuff. We're discussing money laundering connections to organized crime. This extends far beyond the embezzlement at their company. I felt a surge of accomplishment. Can you provide me with concrete evidence? Sophia replied, I'm already done. I'm sending it right now. I ended the call. My mind is racing with possibilities. This was the last nail in their coffin. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and dialed the number. I rarely use Detective Johnson. It's Alex Hartwell. I have some information that I believe you will find very interesting. I was there to watch the dominoes fall one by one. I sat in my study browsing news articles on my tablet. The headlines screamed about scandal and crime. Local businessman Carter Miller has been arrested on multiple charges. Fraud investigation grows. Rebecca Hartwell is implicated. A knock on the door interrupted my reading. It was Dylan. Have you watched the news? He asked, as he settled into the chair across from me. I nodded, a satisfied smile playing across my lips. It is all coming together. Dylan leaned forwards, his voice low. Alex, don't you think this is sufficient? They are ruined. Perhaps it is time to let go. I fixed him with a hard look. Let it go. Following what they did. No, Dylan. This is no longer just about revenge. It is about justice. He raised his hands in surrender. Okay, man. I just hope you know what you're doing. As Dylan left, I returned to my computer. It was time for the next phase. Using a series of fake accounts, I began leaking compromising photos and messages about Rebecca on social media. Her once pristine online presence has devolved into a hotbed of scandal and disgrace. My phone vibrated with a message from Sophia. Rebecca's latest job application has just arrived. Do you want me to make the call? Do it, I replied. I could almost hear Sophia's glee when she called back an hour later. It's finished. She said an anonymous tip about her criminal record and infidelity. They practically tripped over themselves when they rescinded the offer. I gave myself a moment of satisfaction before moving on to the next task. Days passed and Rebecca's world grew smaller. Her friends left her one by one. Her family, unable or unwilling to support her in the face of mounting evidence and social pressure, turned against her. I made certain of that. She sent carefully crafted messages and evidence to her parents and siblings. She has disgraced us all. I overheard her father say something at a local coffee shop. We can't associate with her anymore. The final part of my plan was possibly the crew STV, Rebecca messages through erasable means, pushing her already fragile psyche to the brink. You annihilate everything you touch. Nobody will ever love you again. You are better off dead. I ensured she had no access to mental health services, canceling appointments and spreading rumors about her instability among local therapists. As I sat in my study watching the final pieces fall into place, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Rebecca and Carter had tried to destroy me, to take away everything I valued. Instead, I had dismantled their lives, leaving nothing but the ashes of their betrayal. Some might consider it cruel. I called it justice. Madison's laughter echoed in from the backyard where she was playing with her new nanny. I smiled, knowing that everything I had done was to keep her safe, to ensure that Rebecca's selfishness never hurt her again. I picked up my phone and dialed a familiar number. Sophia. It's finished. Thank you for everything. As I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The war had ended and I had emerged victorious. Let Rebecca and Carter rot in the hell they had made for themselves. I had a daughter to raise and a life to restore, and this time nothing would get in my way. The text message glowed on my phone screen. Alex, please, one final time. We need to talk, Rebecca. I stared at the message, pondering my next steps. After a moment, I typed back fine. The coffee shop. On 5th 30 minutes I arrived early and chose a seat that provided a clear view of the entrance. Rebecca walked in and I barely recognized her. My confident, poised wife was no longer with me. In her place stood a shell, hollow-eyed and trembling. She slid into the seat across from mine. Alex and I cut her off. Save it, Rebecca. I'm not here to apologize or explain. Her eyes filled with tears. So why did you agree to meet? I leaned forward, my voice low and firm, to ensure you understood exactly what you'd done and what would happen next. For the next hour, I detailed every aspect of her downfall, legal battles, social isolation, and financial ruin. Rebecca appeared to withdraw even more with each revelation. Why, she whispered as I finished. Why go to these lengths? I stood up and looked down at her because you decided to destroy our family. Now you have to deal with the consequences. As I turned to leave, Rebecca grabbed my arm. Alex, please. I realize I made a mistake. But isn't it enough? Can't we try and salvage something? I pulled my arm away. There is nothing left to salvage. Rebecca, you've made your choice. Now deal with it. Walking out of the coffee shop, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. It was finished. Back at home, I discovered Madison playing in the living room with Julia, the woman I'd been seeing for several months. Daddy Madison burst out crying and ran to hug me. Have you seen what Julia and I made? I scooped her up and smiled. No, princess. Why aren't you showing me? As Madison begged me to see their art project. Julia caught my attention. Is everything okay? She has a mouth. I nodded and mouthed back. Perfect. Later that night, after Madison went to bed, Julia and I sat on the porch swing. So is it really over? She inquired, her hand touching mine. I squeezed her fingers completely. The attorney called this afternoon. Rebecca has no claim to anything. Not the house, nor the business, and definitely not Madison. Julia leaned her head against my shoulder. How are you feeling? I took a deep breath. Looking out at the quiet street, I feel free to move forward without looking over my shoulder. She raised her head, meeting my gaze. What about us? Are we also moving forward? I smiled and pulled her close. Absolutely. In fact, I was wondering how you feel about house hunting this weekend. Julia's eyes widened. Are you serious? I nodded. New home. New beginnings for all of us. Julia hugged me tight. Melly. And I felt the last of the tension from the previous few months melt away. The war was over and I'd won. Now was the time to embrace the future. Daddy. Yeah. Madison squealed as I pushed her onto the swing in our new backyard. I laughed, giving her another push any higher. And you'll be in the clouds. Princess. On the patio, Julia called out, lunch is ready, you both. As we sat around the table, I couldn't help but reflect on how far it'd come in just a few months. The new home was everything we had hoped for, a wonderful fresh start for our small family. So Madison, Julia said, handing her a sandwich. Are you excited for your school play next week? Madison nodded enthusiastically. Yeah. I get to be the leading tree. I chuckled, the most important role in all forest production. Julia pulled me aside after lunch while Madison was working on homework. Hey, I was thinking that there is a community meeting tonight to discuss starting a support group for families dealing with betrayal and divorce. Perhaps you would like to go. I raised an eyebrow while she squeezed my hand. Your story has the potential to significantly benefit others. Alex, show them a light at the end of the tunnel. I thought about it for a moment. You know what? Maybe you are right. That evening, I found myself at a community center, surrounded by people whose struggles were all too familiar here. Would you like to share your story? The group leader inquired. Before I knew it, I was standing up. My name is Alex, and years ago my wife betrayed me. As I was speaking, I noticed hope rekindling in the eyes of those who listened. After I finished, a man approached me. Thank you, he replied, his voice choked with emotion. I've been feeling very lost, but hearing your story gives me hope. Julia turned to face me as we drove home. You did well tonight, Alex. I am proud of you. I smiled, feeling a warm sensation spread across my chest. I think I might go back next week. The following month saw a flurry of positive changes. I threw myself into community service, utilizing my resources to assist others who had been betrayed at home. Every day, Our little family grew closer together. One evening, as Julia and I were watching Madison practice her ballet routine in the living room, I had an epiphany. I believe I want to write a book. I blurted out. Julia looked at me surprised. What exactly is the subject of this book? I motioned around us this. All of it, the betrayal, the struggle and rebuilding. If my story could give even one person the strength to move forward. Julia's face lightened up. Alex, that's a great idea. As I began working on the book, I discovered old passions and pursued new ones. I took up photography, resumed playing guitar, and even joined a local basketball league. Throughout it all, I kept a healthy balance, no matter how busy things became. I always had time for Madison's recital, Julia's art shows, and our family game nights. Madison looked up at me one night as I was tucking her into bed. Her big, innocent eyes shining. "Daddy," she spoke softly. "Are you happy right now?" My heart felt full of emotion. "Yes, sweetie. I'm extremely happy." "Are you in?" She nodded and smiled. "I enjoy her new family." "Julia makes you smile more." I kissed her forehead. "Doesn't she? And you know what? You're the one who makes me smile the most." As I closed her door, I noticed Julia waiting in the hallway. She wrapped her arms around me. "You're an incredible father, Alex," she whispered. I held her close. "I'm feeling truly content for the first time in years. And you're an incredible partner. I'm not sure what I would do without you." We stood there for a moment, taking in the simple joy of our life together. The past may have been painful, but the future awaits. The future was very bright. As I stepped off the stage, applause echoed throughout the auditorium. The Crystal Award felt heavy in my hands, a testament to how far I had come. "This concludes our annual philanthropy gala," the announcer's voice boomed. "Once again, congratulations to Alex Hartwell on his outstanding contributions to our community." As I returned to our table, Julia stood up beaming with pride. "That was an incredible speech, Alex," she said, drawing me into a hug. Madison tugged on my sleeve. "Does this mean we can go to the beach now, Daddy?" I laughed and ruffled her hair. "You bet, Princess. First thing tomorrow morning." The following day, we found ourselves on a stunning tropical beach. Julia and I watched Madison's first snorkeling lesson. I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led us here. "She is a natural," Julia commented, squeezing my hand. I nodded. A lump is forming in my throat. "She's amazing. I'm extremely grateful for her. For the two of you." Julia turned to me, her eyes bright. "Alex, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." But before she could continue, I dropped to one knee in the sand and took out a small velvet box. "Julia," I exclaimed, my heart pounding. "The last 2 years have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me the true meaning of love and partnership. Will you marry me?" Julia's eyes welled up with tears as she enthusiastically nodded yes. 1,000 times yes. As we embraced, I heard some excited splashing. Madison was running toward a snorkel mask. "Did she say yes?" she squealed. I scooped her up, and then all she certainly did. "Sweetheart, how would you feel about being our flower girl?" Madison's eyes lit up with joy. "Really? I get to participate in the wedding?" Julia laughed. She wrapped her arms around both of us. "Of course. We are a family." After all, the months preceding the wedding flew by in a blur of preparations and celebrations. Madison enthusiastically embraced her role as flower girl, while also excelling in her studies and dance recital. One evening, as I was finishing up my vows, my phone vibrated with a notification. Mr. Hartwell, a reader of my book, sent me an email. It read, "I just wanted to say thank you. Your story encouraged me to leave my abusive marriage and start over. You showed me that there is life after betrayal. Thank you for sharing your journey." I sat back. This was why I wrote the book and started the support groups. I knew my experience could help others find their way out of darkness. It made everything I'd been through worthwhile. The day of the wedding began bright and clear. As I stood at the altar, I watched Madison scatter rose petals down the aisle. I felt a sense of calm come over me, and then I saw Julia, radiant in white, approaching me with love in her eyes. In that moment, I knew for certain that this was where I was supposed to be. As we exchanged vows, I looked around at the assembled friends and family. There were so many faces that had been present during the darkest times. Now it's time to celebrate the best. At the reception, I clinked to my glass signaling for attention. It was time for my speech. 2 years ago I started. I thought my life had ended. I'd been betrayed by the person I trusted the most and I couldn't see any way forward. I paused, looking for Julia and Madison. However, life has a funny way of surprising you. From that darkness emerged the most beautiful light. Julia Madison, you two are my whole world. You've shown me the true meaning of love and family. I raised a glass to second chances, resilience, and the power of love to heal even the most severe wounds. Thank you for being a part of this journey. As the room erupted, with cheers and applause, I drew Julia and Madison closer. Whatever challenges the future may bring, I knew we'd face them together. Our story had only just begun and I was excited to see where it would take us. Here's the next story. Damn it, I swore under my breath. Not for the first time in the previous 2 weeks. I deeply regretted having contacted Gabriel Hias at all. What did my old man say? Never where you eat. Perhaps he didn't specify the location, but it certainly applied to Gabrielle. She was not only the wife of our neighbor Travis Hias, a soft-bodied laboratory assistant at the local Centers for Disease Control and Prevention laboratory, but also an old friend of my wife's. Elise considered her a friend. I'm sure Gabrielle's actions during those afternoon sessions at home and in the car went beyond any definition of friendship, including the broadest one. She clearly gave it her all the first time. To her twisted mind, I was probably a trophy, something she stole from her friends. Most likely I was the last in a long line of boyfriends and husbands. Her friends, with whom she managed to sleep behind the backs of their girlfriends or wives as part of her hobby, which she revived a few years ago when she graduated high school. My drinking buddies at the local bar told me Gabrielle was legendary. She slept with the entire football team. Some of her cheerleaders fought with her after rumors circulated that she was spreading her hips for lip friends. I've always been amazed that she's kept some friends from those days. They quarreled but remained close, especially Will, who was as distinct from Gabrielle as the sun was from the moon. Willow was a quiet, sweet girl and Gabrielle was a who didn't think twice about cheating her friends to get what she wanted. Despite the reader's antics, none of the girls behaved wisely. They did not end their relationship with Becky. Even when she appeared to be about to explode, Gabrielle discovered her husband in a deep state of ecstasy as well as in her throat. Gabrielle's monosyllabic statement was always able to silence the group "Remember that you owe me." This phrase inevitably elicited silence and guilty glances from the ladies. I recall a situation in which the claws were literally released and the phrase brought those painted nails to a halt just before they would have ripped open Gabrielle's skin. Elise simply refused to the story behind Gabrielle's magic phrase, no matter how many times I asked. Only through a combination of overheard conversations and urban gossip did I discover that Gabrielle's past and transformation into an urban cheater are largely the result of an unfortunate prank date, rape, and a boy named Steve. In fact, when I mentioned all 3 of these facts in front of Gabrielle, she became enraged and kicked me out of her house, my pants down to my knees. I was just relieved. There were no witnesses, or so I thought. Elise told me nothing about Gabrielle when we first married. To be honest, Gabrielle appeared to be perfectly normal in her early years, just like any ordinary housewife in our neighborhood. Everything has changed over the past few years. At parties where her friends brought their boyfriends or partners, women always kept a close eye on their men. When Gabrielle appears when husbands or guilty male companions chased angry women fleeing a party, Gabrielle responded with a cruel, devil smile. Probably a pattern. Elise told me nothing about Gabrielle when we first married. To be honest, Gabrielle seemed perfectly normal in her early years, like any ordinary housewife in our neighborhood. Everything has changed over the past few years. When Gabrielle appeared at a party where her friends had brought their boyfriends or partners, the women always kept a close eye on their men. When husbands or guilty male companions chased angry women fleeing a party, Gabrielle looked at them with her trademark cruel and evil smile. In one memorable incident, Elaine's husband, Vic, was seen running after her, the front of his shirt fluttering from an unbuttoned fly. However, In the small town where we all lived, there was an absurd need to maintain visibility, so no one condemned Gabrielle for her actions. Nobody told Travis about this either, who frequently worked long hours and avoided social gatherings in order to provide a better life for his wife. Willa reported having a dilemma after attempting to communicate with the guy. She wanted to warn Travis about the dangers of his marriage, but she didn't want to betray her best friend. Looking back, I can't recall exactly what drew me to Gabrielle. I thought she was disgusting when she resumed her career as a neighborhood cheater. I felt sorry for Travis because his wife made him a CUCKO. Of course, none of these thoughts crossed my mind on that hot autumn evening when I was sitting on the porch drinking beer and this peroxide bomb spoke to me. It didn't help that Elise and I had one each. Looking back, I can't recall exactly what drew me to a thought she was disgusting when she resumed her career as a neighborhood cheater. I felt sorry for Travis because he had a wife who dragged him down. Of course, none of these thoughts occurred to me while thinking. This peroxide bomb spoke to me one autumn evening as I was thoughtfully drinking beer on the porch. It didn't help that Elise and I had one of our quiet arguments about the garage's future bills that night, and she took the kids to her sister's for a sleepover. So I was still paying all the bills. I didn't stop her from going to work whenever she wanted, though I did have. Could anyone blame me for succumbing to temptation and taking advantage of a brief opportunity to relieve stress with a woman as amusing as she appeared? My only thought was, this has nothing to do with Elise. It's just something for you. Of course, I deserve something for myself. Despite everything I did to prevent it, the disaster happened. It went from a one-time mistake to a full-fledged novel. The next day, I washed my face in the bathroom. I even convinced myself that alcohol and depression were to blame for everything and that I would be able to work things out with Gabrielle and clarify everything so that Willow would never find out and suffer as a result. It sounded reasonable in the restroom. I emerged from the bathroom with brazen confidence and speed, doing my best to clean everything up, while Gabrielle lay there smiling at me, resisting the urge to use her again. I told her in as cold a tone as possible to get her ass out of here before my wife returned. Why are you feeling unwell? Lover boy, I am not your lover. I do not love you. I adore my wife. I growled and clenched my jaw. Her narrowed eyes indicated that I had enraged her. Really? It's ironic that you're still dripping from me. Don't you think? The venom in that has chilled my blood. What do you want? Gabrielle, I want to know more about what happened last night. More of what Elise has had for years when she became involved with a tough biker. I knew she had made a good decision. I just never thought he was so good. In light of day, Gabrielle's antics appeared quite vulgar. Even seeing her lick those red-hot lips made me uneasy. I couldn't remember what I saw in her the night before. Seeing the rebellion of what was between my legs against the voice of reason which vanished amid the white noise of lust. Gabrielle smiled and said, well, a portion of someone agrees, even if he denies it. The ringing of the clock intensified the haze of lust that was quickly engulfing my senses. Stop. Damn it. I can't handle it right now. Just get out of this house before Elise returns with the children. Gabrielle's expression was angry. I realized I was about to get a hell of a car in my hands. So you think you can use me and then throw me away like trash? Her claws were ready. They were planning to skin me today. I was saved by the sound of a motor approaching the next entrance. A quick glance out the window revealed that Travis was returning from his night shift. Listen, I replied, directing the enraged woman to the back door. If you don't want domestic violence and a divorce from your husband, you should return to your home. We can discuss this another day. I saw Gabrielle's indecision and realized I had nearly escaped. She knew she'd lose everything if Travis divorced her, and while she may disrupt Elise and my relationship, she will receive nothing from us. The practical Gabrielle gained the upper hand and, with a hard look that promised retribution for my treatment of her, she exited through the back. After a few minutes of waiting and not hearing the sounds of a fight or an enraged husband ready to exact revenge from the next house, I relaxed a little and began putting the house in a state that did not scream at Elise. I just used your best friend in our house. After the weekend, Willis and my relationship improved significantly. I'll be the first to admit that part of the reason for this could be my attempt to overcome the nagging guilt that plagued me after making love to Gabrielle. I understand nothing can compensate for having an affair with your wife's best friend. But what could I do? It happens. I just had to move on and do my best not to mess up the situation. I tried just 1 week. The next weekend, the neighbors hosted a barbecue party. Apart from the heat emanating from the glowing coals, Gabrielle did her best to increase the temperature. She dressed in an outfit that revealed more than it hid. In fact, the shorts were so tight that I swear most of the guys at the party caught a glimpse of the camel's foot that she flaunted whenever she bent at the waist. I understand that all of this sounds like an excuse for a jerk who couldn't move on from a mistake he'd already made and should have known better not to make it again. But tell that to 10 hot men under the age of 90. And 9 of them will look embarrassed wiping drool from their chins at the sight of such an error. Once again, Jackson Jr. got me in trouble. Gabrielle quickly spilled a jug of sweet tea on her forehead, rendering her daring outfit completely inappropriate. The way she looked at me, while pretending to wipe herself dry, made it clear that this was no accident. When she asked for my assistance, I made some polite excuses. I led her away from the party, barely noticing the sharp stares that followed us into the cool darkness of the pantry. Or at least I believe that is where we ended up. She was on top of me before I could say anything. I doubt I would have said anything reasonable in that situation before reacting. The door flew open unexpectedly and 3 more of Willis's friends stood and looked at the guilty adulterer, who had biological evidence of their infidelity on their bodies. Gabrielle went on the offensive. Once she recovered from the shock, she was yelling at Elaine and Becky, who were busy photographing the perpetrators. They were caught off guard and faced almost certain death. I paid no attention to Gabrielle's verbal altercation with her 2 friends. I didn't bother Lisa, who stood there looking at me with her mouth open as I put on my jeans. I braced myself for hell. Snatches of their conversation danced on the edge of my hearing. So you'll have to share it. No, Dan. It's a shame, you fool. Unless you want all of these photos to go viral and Travis to dump you for free. When Gabrielle turned and looked at me with pursed lips and a greedy gleam appeared in Elaine and Becky's eyes, I realized everything was going downhill quickly. Jackson, you'll have a few playmates over the next few months, Gabrielle admitted, openly sulking. What do you mean? Of course, these women cannot mean it. No, that's crazy. They're all Willis's friends. Elaine was the first to respond dry. Our local cheater claims that she will share you with us for the next few months. You won't have a problem with that, right? Bye. But you have Willis friends. We cannot. That didn't stop you from using her, Becky said, helling her contemptuous nod, pointing directly at Gabrielle. This was Anne. Was this your first mistake? Elaine asked while I was stuttering. Why are you doing this to Elise? The silence that followed as the 3 women looked at each other before focusing on Gabrielle and me gave me hope that I had found an escape. This hope faded almost immediately. Technically, Gabrielle, the cheater, stole from Elise. Now we're stealing from her, and only after all she had stolen from us. Payback involves a couple of fools. Elaine giggled. You cannot do that. I'm not some kind of toy boy. And do you think Gabrielle thinks you are someone else? Lisa's words were calm and serious, drowning out the protest that rose in my throat and died on my lips. I looked at the women around me. They were all appealing in some way, and it wouldn't be difficult to use them in a perverted way. I was probably fulfilling some sort of perverted fantasy with the wives of several men. This is how my second career as a neighborhood cheater began, although it does not compare to the first time I chose. The variant compensated for the dry spell I experienced as a monogamous married man. I was under no illusions that these women loved me. No, the truth is that they saw making love with me as a way to repay Gabrielle and their husbands. At first I was struck by how naturally they behaved around Elise, despite the fact that they were openly making love to their friend's husband. Looking back, I can see how easily they were hypocritical that early autumn evening. That night I used Gabrielle, Elaine and Becky all in Becky's car. The couple drove a short distance to a nearby pharmacy and supermarket to get painkillers and ice. However, Becky's car began to stall, and guess who was supposed to come to her rescue? Elaine's painkiller made for some good love-making in Becky's car. Becky applied an ice pack after I slammed her hard against the steering wheel twice. She had minor skin burns on her chest and back, which she would have struggled to explain if she hadn't used ice. We had to wait for Becky to bring another bag of ice and Elaine to bring some wet wipes to clean up the remnants of our lovemaking. Before returning to the party as an engine repair expert, I explained that hour-to-hour absence from the party was due to a lack of spark plugs to replace the faulty ones in Becky's car. While I avoided Willis's gaze for the rest of the night and felt guilty, none of her supposed friends appeared to feel guilty toward her. In reality, they joked and laughed around Elise as if they hadn't just made love with her husband. Lisa was the most indecisive of the group. At first, I assumed she decided to take the right path and avoid me. It made me respect her. After all, I hadn't gone so far as to dismiss what I'd done as a violation of my wedding vows. One day she showed up drunk at Gabrielle's meeting with the main cheater. It appears that she needed to strengthen her nerves with alcohol before using me. Before I began removing her clothes, she inquired with a curious twinkle of rage in her eyes if I typically use other people's wives. I was irritated by her arrogance, especially since she clearly succumbed to temptation herself, and responded, rather rudely, that I only use women who ask me to do it, whether they are wives or someone else. The rage seemed to drain from her and she closed her eyes, surrendering to me during a subsequent meeting in Becky's bathroom. At her insistence, she even admitted that she was considering leaving her husband for me. When she saw the horror on my face, she laughed bitterly, claiming it was a joke for the rest of my life. I would watch the tears seep from her closed eyes. I couldn't understand women who want the illusion of love while easily breaking vows of love and fidelity to a man who isn't their husband. I looked down at Hannah and noticed that Lisa had removed her ring for the first time since we met. She'd never taken it off before, and the sight of its shine made her cry every time. This time, however, things were different. She lay down in the bathtub and said in an even voice that one day she returned early in the morning and, not finding her husband, went to look for Gabriel. Despite seeing his car at the entrance, she discovered Gabriel's back door opening, noticing traces of familiar clothing. Went upstairs to see her husband using Gabriel in the bathroom. They did not even hear me. They were both grunting and screaming very loudly. He hasn't been as passionate in recent years. I assumed it was just stress at work, but I believe he just needs another girl. I felt pity for the woman sitting in the tub with me, despite the fact that she treated me as nothing more than a tool for revenge. I noticed tears falling from the corners of her eyes. She closed her eyes when she noticed me looking into them, but the tears continued to fall into the water around us. I was curious what those tears meant: guilt for infidelity, pain from her husband's betrayal, or bitterness at discovering that she had found another illusion to replace the broken fantasy of perfect marital love. When we were dry and ready to go, Lisa awkwardly thanked me. I gritted my teeth and told her not to worry. I am doing this because I have to. Lisa smiled a sad smile and announced that she was finishing her sessions. I couldn't help but ask a typical question during a weekend interview: why? Her response reminded me of the Lisa I thought I knew, but who had been missing since that autumn night. I had a strange feeling. I knew what it was, but the name eluded me. After a great love-making and release, there was an emptiness, an unexplainable pain, and I couldn't wait to be able to separate from the person with whom I was having sex at the time. My heart and body seemed to be at odds with each other, each wanting to go in a direction that the other despised. Among the entire group of women who separated me, Lisa was probably the closest to understanding my situation. After all, it sounded strangely similar to what Willow once told me when I asked her what she saw in me as a recent college graduate, a biker with no possessions. When I met her, she mentioned some dead Greek. We are constantly striving for the forbidden and craving what is denied to us. It felt like I was back to being a cool biker attracting all that he needed, rather than an aging married man dealing with life's realities. But I did not want to hurt Elise. I adore this woman. I've loved her for a long time. I still loved her, despite my actions, and my heart ached every time I imagined how she would react if she ever found out. But I was unable to withdraw from the agreement. It would mean certain death, at least when I was dealing with these idiots. There was a chance I could work it out. Eventually, in the end, my mind figured everything out. This thing, whatever it was with these women, was simply something I was doing for myself. It had nothing to do with Elise, and it won't her until she discovers the truth. Which meant I had to make sure these women were content and didn't stare at my wife. then everything will go to hell. 2 weeks earlier, you've got to help me. Jackson Ravis knows he told me he was getting divorced. What the hell? What does he know about me? Who informed him? I thought I was about to have a heart attack. When Willis's face appeared in front of my eyes, my throat tightened and I struggled to breathe accusation and rage, disappointment, and the tears. God, I did it. My sins have returned to bite me in the balls. Strangely, Miss Dewis. His voice echoed in my head, drowning out Gabrielle hysteria. Jackson Miles. One day you'll understand the cost of bad behavior. Young man. The old was correct. I am going to lose my family, my wife, and everything I've worked hard for. Are you listening to me? The array of colors that flashed before my eyes when my entire vision went down the drain gradually gave way to a gray reality. Or rather, Gabrielle's almost firm expression. When she slapped me hard on the face, I recoiled. I have carefully considered the worst mistake of my life. He has no idea who I slept with, but he says someone will give him proof if he needs it. When Gabrielle's words reached me, the pressure on my chest eased slightly. So he had no idea. It was me, I whispered. Hopefully not, but it's only a matter of time before he finds out, Gabrielle responded. The glimmer of hope faded as despair crept into my heart. Jackson, please help me. I need to do something about Travis. He will ruin me and leave me penniless. I'm not concerned about the divorce. It will be an opportunity for us to be together. If we had some of his cash, we could. Gabrielle, there is no we. I adore my wife and I adore my family. We agreed that it was just an affair. I tried to keep my voices as quiet and even as possible. I didn't want to piss her off. It was impossible to predict Gabrielle's behavior when she was on edge. This fool belonged to her class of lunatics. You bastard. You just want to use me and leave me on the sidelines when things get tough. When her screeching became louder by several deck B, I looked around in horror. Fortunately, there was no evidence that anyone had noticed. The neighbors remained in their homes, most likely sleeping off the unusually warm spring morning. I placed my hand over Gabrielle's mouth and pushed her deeper into the garage. Elise had never been inside this part of the house. It was completely my domain. Shut up. I barked as Gabrielle stared at me, attempting to free herself. Look, we've both used each other. It was simply making love. So don't tell me nonsense about love or that we have a future. Gabrielle calmed down as she realized I couldn't be persuaded. I thought we had something better than making love. You're aware that I love you, she muttered, pouted and looked at me with puppy dog eyes. The only problem was that I knew what was typically hidden behind that expression: greed and callous disregard for everyone except myself. I exhaled. It was like speaking to a child. Only no child would approach me for assistance in sabotaging her husband. Car, you don't truly love me. Gabrielle, you're not sure how to live with a guy like me. I don't resemble Travis at all, and I probably make only 30 of what he does. I knew that nothing could help Gabrielle more than common sense, expressed in dollars and cents. She was a girl with a golden heart. Literally. I did not immediately calm her down with my logic. Are you certain? There's no way back. Regardless, he is unaware of us. I may not be the best wife, Jackson, but I do know my husband Aston was serious. When he decides, there is no way to change this. The strange light that appeared in her eyes as she straightened her back indicated that I was in trouble again. We may not have had love, but we did have fun. Jackson, fun is never free. It's time to pay for the fun and parade. You had, Gabrielle whispered and grabbed the front of my t-shirt. Gabrielle? What do you want from me? I asked Helly, as a tremor danced down my spine. Well, I told you already. But we can't. If Ash has an accident or dies, you'll be the main suspect. And so will I if anyone notices that you brought the car, he roared to the shop. To be honest, I didn't want to be involved in Gabrielle's sinister plans. I've never avoided blood or dirty deeds before, but I didn't have anything against Travis. The thought of physically harming a man after having used his wife made my stomach turn. Well, if necessary, I will not go alone. I'll take you and the other with me. I could almost see the wheel turning in her mind as she hissed this threat. The gleam of madness in her eyes terrified me about what was going to happen. I've got a solution. I'll ruin both of our cars. You're going to show me how to mess up a spark plug and how to deal with a brake line. I'll make sure he uses my car. If he has a minor accident, then nobody will suspect me. I would not ruin my own car. The harsh laughter that came from that gudy red mouth made me want to throw up. I was making love to a monster and she was about to swallow me. Gabrielle gently touched my cheek with her hand to warn me before leaving. Remember, no excuses or tricks. Otherwise we'll all be down by Monday. My head was already aching as Becky, Elaine and Lisa applied more pressure. Gabrielle clearly took the time to threaten them. Over the weekend it was held to hold out for the next week. And when I intercepted an envelope containing a photo of me with one of the girls, I realized Gabrielle could no longer be held on Wednesday morning. The following week I went to work in a small group and I met with you in the workshop. After sending the rest of my team to lunch, I explained and demonstrated the fundamentals, making sure to give Gabrielle what she needed. While I put on the gloves this time, the group fell silent and everyone looked at each other with a mix of anxiety and fear. Lisa lingered as the other women walked out of the workshop and back to Elaine's car, which was parked nearby. Do we really need to do this? Do we have a choice? Gabrielle will take us all to hell if we don't do what she says. Lisa's small, sharp nod confirmed that she understood, but something about her expression made me uneasy. It was as if something had frozen inside Lisa and she had made a decision. It wasn't until Friday morning that I found out what the rest of the band's roles were. Gabrielle's monthly baccalaureate party was set to take place the following evening. Travis hadn't officially announced the breakup and Gabrielle was counting on him. To want things to return to normal and her plan to succeed, she had to work on her car. While Travis played card games at Elaine's house with the rest of her husbands, I stopped attending these sessions and communicating with others. Guilt is an odd thing, and I couldn't look these guys in the eyes. After meeting their wives in the biblical sense, I picked up the newspaper early in the morning and noticed Gabrielle on her way to Travis's car. He most likely drove her car to work while Gabrielle waited at the mechanic's house for his car. I knew Travis's car hadn't been picked up because there were only 2 workshops in the area, and the second team had already left for their annual trip to Vegas. Gabrielle knew she couldn't call my workshop to avoid suspicion. If her plans failed, Travis's car will remain on the road until Gabrielle replaces the missing plugs. After Travis was involved in an accident on her way to church that Sunday, Gabrielle was able to claim, with the help of her small group of friends and neighbors, that the car was in working order when Travis drove her to work on Friday. Arousing Travis's suspicions was her method of gaining control over her future ex-husband, who valued his reputation and despised anything looked bad. Of course, Gabrielle intended to leverage this influence into a lucrative alimony agreement. Elise told me about the breakfast party while holding a cup of tea. She was unable to attend the most recent baccalaureate due to illness. My poor wife was out of sorts, with headaches and a cold that made her eyes swell and her nose red. She has even stopped eating recently. When she last ate a full meal, I found her in the bathroom. She even slept on the couch, afraid of passing the cold to me and the kids. So are you attending the party? Will? His gaze fell on mine and she asked quietly, do you think it's worthwhile? I looked at her in disbelief, noting tiny wrinkles on her forehead and dark spots under her eyes. How could I have missed that? Something was wrong with my wife. What was bothering her? Something indescribable appeared in her eyes, something that triggered an alarm in my head scream for a moment. I assumed she was going to tell me something. That just is annoying. And everything else faded away at once. Elise hurriedly resolved the children's dispute, leaving me with a knot of anxiety twisting inside me. Earlier in the evening, I had been on edge all day, watching the neighborhood go about its business, with dogs barking, children laughing, and the sound of the mower told me that everything was fine, at least for everyone else. My heart was heavy with guilt, shame and trepidation. Gabrielle's plan was for Travis to have an accident be under suspicion, forcing him to file for alimony. However, anything can happen during an accident. I didn't use my own hands, but I knew I was just as much of an accomplice as if I had worked on the machines. I was keeping an unusually close eye on the house next door. All of this went unnoticed while Willow was busy making custard pie for the girls' meeting. Although she was going to refuse to attend the party due to a persistent cold, dinner was held in painful silence, as I couldn't take my gaze away from the windows. overlooking Gabrielle's house. The children were sent to spend the night with Willis's sister, and the house was strangely quiet in the absence of their constant arguments. When the group arrived at the house next door, Gabrielle was as loud as usual. Despite the silence, Travis exited the house and walked towards the card game. When I saw Gabrielle sneaking through the back door with Elaine, I knew it was time to stop this. Before it was too late, I opened my mouth to confess everything when Elise put her finger to my lips, drawing my attention away from the window. I believe we should play the old game again. I'd like to tell you a story. I was so distracted that I almost forgot what game she was talking about. We played a game. When we first met, we created a story out of everyday objects that we shared. My stories were almost always about cool bikers and their women, whereas Will's stories were far more diverse. The memories of how we were before everything became routine brought back feelings I had forgotten. They also fueled the acid of guilt and regret that had accumulated within me. But Elise, I need to tell you something. Let me tell you my story first. This is an important moment. What I'd like to say is, no, you and the girls used to think I was dumb because I didn't talk. Well, I'm tired of remaining silent, and you'll start listening. The steely gleam in my mic Wi-Fi's told me that resisting was not the best option. I stared blankly at her as she sat at the other end of the table. She was holding a button that looked similar to mine. Elise noticed that my gaze was focused on the button in her hands. I'm glad you noticed. Yes, that's a button from your clothing. She must have gotten off. A while ago I nodded. Gabrielle's plan is still causing some distraction. When I felt the heat from Willis's gaze, I turned my attention back to the table. The story I like to tell you today is as old as time. Betrayal. Lust and vengeance, all the elements of a soap opera are present, and it all begins with a button. Elise smiled strangely as she cut an extra piece of pie and placed it in front of me. You haven't eaten enough dinner. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Have a slice of pie. There was something strange about Will, something I couldn't recognize, but it was there. She was irritated. If I had to describe it, I'd say it emanated from her, as emanates from a classic car whose engine purrs beautifully. The evidence is 2020, and I was blinded by anxiety, shame and guilt. I was absent-mindedly playing with a piece of pie while trying to smile at my wife. That is strange smile. Her lips moved between a grimace and a sarcastic grin. Once more the story starts. Like most other stories, a girl encounters a bad guy. A girl falls for a bad guy and marries him, despite the objections of those closest to her. I know. Nodded though I wasn't sure what she was saying about the movie plot. Whole life. The pie's sweet aroma filled my mouth, as did its slightly strange aftertaste. God, I'm eating pie when some people could be dying. Miss Du Bois will eventually send me to a special section of hell. I paused and was surprised. I hadn't thought about my Sunday school teacher in years, but I found myself thinking about her several times recently. I suppose it was a sense of guilt. Nobody made me feel like a sinner. Miss Duo also celebrated their first wedding anniversary. The wife purchased a jacket that her husband had admired for a long time. There was nothing particularly noteworthy about it, but she had been saving for a long time to afford this jacket and the antique brass buttons she sewed on to make it unique. He was ecstatic when he got this jacket. They laughed, danced, and welcomed their first child. That day I smiled, remembering our first few years together. Not everything was sweet, but we weren't tired of life. We could still laugh. After arguments and tears, we listened to one another. We never put our anger to bed. The passion between us was then a roaring fire, one that we were occasionally too tired to feel. These days, after a few years into children, the wife discovers something that will forever change their lives. My stomach clenched as I stared at Elise. Was she still telling us the story, or did she have a different story? That expression in her eyes made me hesitate. The question lingered on the tip of my tongue. Then he fell silent when he heard a sharp knock on the door. The sight of Travis on the doorstep nearly made me speechless. Hello, Jackson. I decided to come inside and sit for a while. I don't want to be responsible for the girls' incomplete party. The guys robbed me, I can't afford it anymore. I brought some wine. May I come inside? He stood there looking at me as if I was some stupid provincial who refused to let neighbor in because that provincial was abusing his wife. Yes, of course. Come inside, I muttered as Travis entered and greeted Elise. It was also strange that they were so familiar. We were friendly neighbors, but not in the way of a kiss on the cheek. I frowned and left it at that. Perhaps I am not the best person to judge Travis. After the usual small talk and wine pouring, Willow returned to the story. We were in the middle of the story when you entered. Would you mind if we continued? Travis. I'm not sure Travis wants to hear this story. Not at all. I'm sure it's very interesting. I'm all ears. For the first time in our friendship, Travis began to irritate me. Anxiety is not confined to my insides, but rather spreads. I drank some wine hoping that Dutch bravery would ease my nerves. So one day this wife made a discovery at a friend's home. She was helping to organize a wardrobe for a charity garage sale. While sorting through clothes to send for sale, she noticed a brooch had fallen off her jacket and rolled under the bed as an orderly. The wife sank to the floor and began to search for the brooch. She groped and pulled it out. The brooch got caught on a small knitted bag, and as she tried to untangle it, the bag flew open. A small collection of buttons scattered across the carpet. Wiley's eyes narrowed, which made me nervous. I took another sip of wine thinking, damn more work. The wife bent down and began collecting the buttons, working quickly until she came across an all-too-familiar button. When she heard approaching footsteps, she put the button in her pocket and closed the back. Hello. What are you doing with this? Her friend asked, reaching for the bag. What is it? Are you collecting anything? I never assumed you were a collector. The friend attempted to avoid the question while reaching for the bag, but the wife was determined to get answers. In the end, the wife had exhausted her friend. Okay. I understand. This is my collection of conquest souvenirs. Are you happy? When did you become a private investigator? Her friend grumbled as she tied up the bag and stuffed it into a closet corner. Souvenirs of conquest. Her friend grinned and said, yes, all my lovers. Seeing his wife's stunned expression, the friend laughed rudely and said, stop being such a prude. Really? All of the men I've made love with have given me souvenirs. Mostly buttons. It's a pity they don't do more with buttons nowadays. It feels good to know that I was the closest to them, even if they had girlfriends or wives. After recovering from the shock, the wife was able to leave her friend's house without breaking down and raising suspicions. She assured herself that it couldn't be what she was thinking. Her husband did not use her best friend. For the first time since their wedding, the wife slept in a separate bed than her husband. My mouth is dry. I broke out in a cold sweat when I realized Willow was no longer telling a fictitious, improvised story. But this is my story. Our story. The pain inside me worsened. She knew, she knows, my God. When the writers said their world was collapsing around them, they meant exactly that. I opened my mouth but was unable to say anything. I must have looked like an idiot with my mouth open. When I looked at my wife, Elise gave me a strange smile before ignoring me and continuing her story. After several days of torment, she decided to ask her other friend. That friend initially grunted and refused, but eventually broke down when his wife threatened to set all hell free. The wife had no idea that the truth would be worse than the hell she believed her life had become. Her sweet husband was not only taking care of her best friend, but also her school band. Thank you, Willie. I'm very sorry. Say nothing. Do not talk to me. After forcing her friend to swear to silence, the wife fell into despair. Was honesty the best policy? Should she end 5 relationships? How can she keep her children safe from the consequences? She considered leaving town, but neither of these options could protect the children. They were doomed to suffer the consequences of their parents' decisions. She cut herself off from the only friend who was honest with her because the pain was too great. The lump in my parched throat started choking me. My stomach pain was getting worse. One day, another victim approached her. Her honest friend couldn't bear the weight of guilt and confessed everything to their friend's husband. And from their shared pain arose a sense of camaraderie. Travis chimed in, and the look of rage and arrogance on his face made me dizzy. As I watched in horror, Travis approached Elise and kissed her, holding the back of her head in his hand. Bastard. I barely had time to suppress the word before Travis turned around and gave me a grin that changed his normally pleasant expression. Did you think you were the only one making love to another person's wife? He reached out to grab the front of my shirt. My limbs were numb and for some reason, my hands refused to form the fist I desperately wanted to throw at Travis's face. Why, buddy? You can't move a finger right. Making love with a lab technician can lead to this. You're experiencing the effects of a heavily diluted stereotype of bachelor Dunham, neurotoxin. Over the last year, we have synthesized and modified it. As a result, it retains low functionality even in more acidic environments like wine. I looked at the half-empty glass of wine on the dining table. Willow was calmly eating a pie on the table next to a bottle of wine. She appeared to be stuffing the remainder of the pie into her mouth as Travis gloated. Do you feel like your guts are being ripped out? There is still nothing you can do. Well, fortunately for you, I'm not a bloodthirsty bastard. It will make you feel terrible, but after some rest, you'll be fine. Furthermore, the dose is small to cause any significant problems. Customers are willing to pay me for the bottles I took from the lab. I heard a click as Travis's face vanished briefly into the blurry fog that appeared in front of my eyes. He must have been snapping his fingers because something flesh-colored flashed before his eyes, too blurry to be identified. What happens if he takes a double dose? That would be dangerous. Elise, what are you doing now? The wine contains a toxin. You need to get him out. It will kill our child. Let me leave. Travis, it is too late. I used the bottle you threw away after filling the wine bottles to make pie cream. They were wrong, but that doesn't mean we're together. I do not want to be with you. There was a loud noise. You are a stupid fool. Do you think he will accept you back? When you slept with another man and became pregnant. Willow remained silent as Travis ran at exhausted Willow's side. I hope you meet a woman who will truly love you. However, if you want this, you must ensure that your prison sentence is short. No longer. The toxin is currently working on these in your poker buddies. Elise had just finished when Travis cursed and bolted out the door. The door slammed shut. Willis gave me a dry smile as he approached. We appeared to be the only ones here while I could barely hear my own raspy whispers. Because we're going to stay together until the end. Remember, I'll never know how my petite wife dragged my ass and herself into our bedroom and threw me on the bed. She disappeared for a while. My thoughts were not particularly deep. As I waited for my wife to return and presumably deliver the final blow, I realized my ears were failing me. When I thought I heard sirens in the distance, a shadow appeared and I braced myself for the final pain that would accompany my departure from this world. Instead, I saw Wolf's blue eyes filled with tears, which fell on my face. As my vision cleared for a brief moment, I felt a soft pair of lips on my mouth before a gentle warmth settled on the mattress. So what was blurred disappeared into the darkness. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.